I'll call to order the council meeting of the Regional Municipality Appeal for Thursday, July the 9th. Roll call, all members are present excepting Councillor Janica, Councillor Kovac, Councillor Miles, and Councillor Tovey. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none. Approval of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Starr, seconded by Councillor Parrish. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Before we get into delegations, it's my understanding that Dr. Mowat, this is your last council meeting here in the chambers, and certainly on behalf of council, I want to recognize all the support and thank you that you've given council over the years. And I know I've certainly appreciated not only your professionalism but certainly your expertise. And one of the things I did want to compliment you on as well, and I think it shows strong leadership here at Peel, is the fact that you've done an excellent job, in my opinion, of not only through mentorship but in succession planning within your department, and I really want to commend you on that. And I know we had a lot of challenges over the years, but we got through them, and a lot of it was to your credit and to the credit of the staff that works with you. And I just want to wish you all the best in your future, because you certainly deserve. Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was actually, as Chair of Health, going to make a few comments today, so you jumped the gun a little bit. I think there's some background on Dr. Mowat that members of council, particularly the new ones, might be interested in knowing if you haven't had the pleasure of working with Dr. Mowat in the past. I know personally I'm going to miss your sense of humor a lot. For a medical officer of health to have a sense of humor, I think, is an important thing, but certainly his roll up the sleeves, walking the talk of what he believes in is very important to him. But Dr. Mowat came to us having had federal, provincial, and local regional experience, so we benefited from that. He's been 40 years in public health, and he joined us in 2007. Certainly during the time that he's been here, he led the public health response to the H1N1 influenza pandemic. He's worked very well with planning staff at the municipal and the regional level to introduce the Healthy Development Index to ensure that we plan and build our communities in a way that supports community health. And he led the development and the implementation of a 10-year strategic plan for public health that included key council priorities such as creating supportive environments for healthy choices to reduce diabetes and obesity, and by strengthening the early childhood development programming to ensure that every child in Peel gets the best start in life. In 2011, under David's leadership, Peel Public Health won the Silver Award for Evidence-Informed Decision-Making from the Institute of Public Administration of Canada. And this year, David is the recipient of the Association of Local Public Health Agencies Distinguished Service Award, and in 2014, the prestigious Canadian Public Health Association, the R.D. DeFries Award. We are going to miss David. He's left things in good hands. As you know, Eileen Davila, Dr. Eileen Davila has followed in his footsteps and served us well. But David, you're going to be missed. You've made a difference here at the Region of Peel, and I'd like to send a personal thank you as well as on behalf of Council.
Thanks, Councillor. Mayor Thompson.
I think it's only fitting, and as Mayor Caledon, I got to say, David, you've done a terrific job. You started at the same time as I did. And I want to say you've led in many fronts. It didn't matter if it was planning or what it was, even on healthy communities and getting people out walking around and start to think in development in many different ways. And you championed, and you had really good arguments and really good facts behind anything you've said. And I've always been quite impressed, and you've taught us a lot to start thinking outside the box. And I want to thank you for that. And I think you've, as Councillor Moore has just said, you've left us in good stead. You have made a huge impact and a big difference here to Peel, and that I thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Crombie.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to echo those sentiments. It's been a pleasure to work with you. You're always professional, provide expert advice. I came to you when we were discussing banning of tanning for teenagers, and you led that crusade for us and helped us guide it through. You always challenged me to take the stairs rather than the elevator. You had me marching up these stairs last year. I remember it well. You've encouraged us on the Healthy Cities front, and your leadership has been outstanding, and we will miss you greatly. I was hoping to get your assistance on hookahs and the impact of hookah smoking that these kids seem to be partaking in. So perhaps you can pass that on and we can look at that in the future. But we wish you well. We wish you weren't retiring or going off to wherever it is you're going off, because you've certainly been made an incredible difference here at the Region of Peel, and we thank you for your service. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to work with you and a pleasure to know you.
Thank you. Councillor Sato.
Thank you. Well, David, it was such a pleasure working with you on the Fit City program and the healthy communities. And, you know, David, Elaine, you spoke about David's work here in Canada, and he's known internationally as well. And I have to say, I had the pleasure of co-presenting in London, England with David, I guess it was 2 years ago now, at the Fit City International Conference. And people were really just hanging on his words. He brought his message. He did it at the conference that we held here in Peel. And you really, just the way you spoke about obesity and diabetes and what we should be doing really resonated with so many people. And you have changed the lifestyles, all what you have done through that. You've changed the lifestyles in Brampton and Mississauga City Hall, and I'm assuming in Caledon as well. And as Mayor Crombie said, you know, encouraging people to take the stairs. But through that program, we have a full new program at the City of Mississauga that would not have happened if it hadn't been for your leadership. And I have to say that of Gail Bursey. The two of you working together just did an amazing job in carrying that message forward. So. You know, you brought recognition to the Region of Peel here in Canada, in New York City as well. That, you know, we worked very closely with the New York City people, but also internationally, people from Brazil and England and all around Europe have learned from you. So, great accolade to you and to the Region of Peel. Thank you. It's been a pleasure working with you.
Thank you. Councillor Unica.
I'd be remiss if I didn't give David a very specific accolade. I'd venture to guess, David, in the time you've been around, as you look as your colleagues on the senior management team, dare I say maybe a discussion for later, in the 30 years I've been around, the greatest challenges and evolutions of running a city bureaucracy falls at your end as compared to finance or works, et cetera, because of the emergence of a far better doctor than you, and that would be Dr. Google. And so now that Dr. Google's here and knows everything, you and we know nothing. And in the face of all of that, you have been steadfast in saying, what does the science say? What does the empirical data say? What do experts in the field say? What does research say? And at the end of the day, under some harsh challenges, you've always been steadfast, rightly so in my opinion, and you've served us well in that regard. I wish you every success and happiness going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sprovieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Dr. Mowat, I just want to also express my appreciation for your dedication to the role of medical officer and dedicating your life to serving and making life better for people. And although we had a bit of difference of opinion on one issue, but generally speaking, I really want to commend you for the great work you've done here in Peel, and I wish you all the good luck in your in the happy retirement. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Dr. Mowat, would you like to make a few comments?
Yes, Chair Dale and councillors, I just want to briefly thank you very much for your kind words. As you've health business for many decades, and I've worked at all three levels of government, and I must say the 8 years that I have served here in Peel have been immensely satisfying, and I hope you agree, productive, and that's in large part due to the excellent support I've had not only from all the staff here in Peel Public Health, but from Jeanette, our Commissioner, and David, our CAO, and above all, from Council. My 10 months as the Chief Medical Officer of Health for the province, where I got a very good view of public health across this province, reinforced my view that here in Peel we are together, council and staff, doing an excellent job, and I could certainly reflect on the product of some of the support that you had been giving us in the past, particularly around issues related to immunization, for example, and it has served the public here well. It is an enormous responsibility that you have been given to care for the health of the 1.3 million people of this region. And I certainly commend Council for their devotion to this task in the past, and I know that will continue in the future, and I'm delighted to leave you in the good hands of Dr. De Villa and all of the other staff. So thank you so much. It's been a wonderful experience.
Well, this moves us to the approval of the minutes. And there is one housekeeping item that I'd like to bring to your attention. It was approved by council. However, there was a glitch in bringing it onto the minutes. So if it's on the screen now, it's that highlighted section that we'll just need to correct on the minutes. And I believe Mayor Thompson had a comment as well.
Yes, I did as well, and it was with the items related to programs and services. And I'm just saying if the staff could report back to Regional Council on the regional official plan policies and financial policies existing and proposing relating near urban agriculture within the region of Peel. If we can do that, I really appreciate that.
Okay, so we'll just move. Sorry.
Sorry, is that taking this direction?
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
as
take that as
direction.
direction. Then all in favor of approval of the minutes as corrected, I guess. Yeah. Carry. And then approval of the agenda. There's oh, there we are. That the agenda for July 9th, 2015 Regional Council meeting include an additional delegation from Darren Steedman, Peel Chapter Chair, Building Industry and Land Development Association, BUILD, regarding the proposed development charges to be dealt with under delegations item 5.1. And it's on your screen. The remainder, it's all correspondence, so I won't read all that. We'll just take it as read, and moved by Councillor Raz, seconded by Councillor Innes. All in favor then of the approval of the agenda? Opposed? Carried. Okay, moving right along into delegations then. Darren Steedman. Is Darren here? There he is. Like the price is right, come on down. Welcome, Darren.
Thank you, Chair Dale. Good morning, Regional Council, staff, and those in attendance today. I just kind of want to take a moment to recognize the Chief Officer of Health as well. He has had a profound impact on the way that planning is unfolding in the region of Peel as well. The healthy planning initiatives that he has I guess, spearheaded, has had an impact on the way communities are planned and the way the industry is delivering communities for tomorrow. And that kind of segues into what we're talking about here today is the development charge. And firstly, I do want to thank staff for their work in preparing the background study and the 3 reports that are in front of you today. I wish it was July 9th, 2017 that I was here. It's a little bit earlier than I thought I would be redelegating. But nonetheless, they have put a lot of time and effort into addressing our concerns, addressing our comments, and trying to deal with the issues that the industry has raised. So I commend them for that. You have very good staff here. When I delegated in May at the public meeting, you heard the request for a pause and to combine the development charge study with the front-end financing process that will be unfolding this fall. My message is the same here today. Why? The simple answer is that the development charge and the front-end financing program are linked. There's a strong connection between what happens between the development charge as well as what happens in a front-end financing scenario. The Region of Halton, a couple years back, did undertake 2 separate processes and found out as they finished the financing component that they had to undo and redo or reboot the development charge. So we're trying to do it all this fall. We've had the opportunity to sit down with some and convey this message, have a good discussion on why we believe that a pause is required, why we believe that the combination of the front-end financing will address some of the issues that we have. Our letter submitted more or less does identify some further concerns, and we're hopeful that a pause will allow us to narrow the gap or the conversation between staff and ourselves. And one thing that I think we have kind of concluded is that for such a large piece of infrastructure, that being the development charge, a $4 billion plus plan, there isn't much contact with regional council. And we think that perhaps as we go forward this fall, there may be an opportunity to have some council members involved in the process to really garner what the conversation is that's happening at the staff level and kind of inform council as well as staff and as well as the industry of everybody's collective concern, and that's affordability. So I did want to be brief, and I am here to answer any other questions that you may have. But once again, thank you very much for the time today to speak.
Okay, thank you. If you'd stay in place, Councillor Sato.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here. Mr. Chairman, as you're aware, and I think it has been distributed, it hasn't, sorry. I have a motion that I want to table today that is with regard to the deputation, and it relates to 6.7. And
10.7.
Sorry, I'm sorry, 10.7. Yeah, I'm reading it right in front of me here and saying 6, but anyway. I'm wondering if, to help the conversation, if the motion could be put up so that members of council could see it. Basically, it's recommending the type of discussion to be held in the fall that the deputant is requesting and the format of that discussion.
Okay. What I'd like to do is see if there's any questions of the deputant first.
Okay.
And secondly, I think we'll bring forward.
If we could bring forward 10.7.
We'll put 5, 6, and 7 because
Okay.
2 of them are presentations.
Okay.
And I would suggest that you hold
Okay.
this because there is reference to a deferral so that,
Right.
that they can do their presentations, and then it will be the first
Okay, that'd be
motion that
fine.
we can take.
That'd be fine, but just to let the members of council know that I am moving that, that we do move into a discussion in the fall to deal with the request that is.
I'm going to direct the clerk to see that all members get a copy now.
Okay.
So they'll have a
Great,
copy.
thank
And
you.
then we'll just go through the deputy
Okay, thank you.
presentations.
That's
and
great,
It'll be
thanks.
the first motion that we'll deal with. Councillor Thompson, or Mayor Thompson.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Darren, when you were talking about a committee, we already have started that dialogue through the Growth Committee. We already have that in place, and I was wondering if the Growth Committee could work through, it's already an established committee versus reinventing the wheel. I think a lot of the fundamentals are there, and I think that would be a good caveat to work with you and the Build Group and other interested parties to have that
Mayor
discussion.
Thompson, I would ask that you bring that up at the time we're discussing the motion, because right now it's just questions to the deputy.
Well, actually, that's my question to him, is I just wondered what he thought of it, is where I was going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the growth management we've participated in. However, from my observation, I believe that the development charge, the preparation of the development charge background study has somewhat been done in isolation of that committee. It does be brought forth to council and to the committee at progress points, but the discussions that are happening between the industry and staff at some of those meetings held here, I think would be beneficial to have some councillor involvement in, and whether it takes the shape of the Growth Management Committee or an advisory committee that some other municipalities kind of set up, a DC advisory committee, I think it'd just be helpful to have some council involvement in that.
Well, the only reason why I was saying growth management is we've had you engaged.
Yep.
And I know originally that's what it was going to be, starting with the DCs, and it morphed into something else, and maybe we need to morph back to where it needs to be in the first place.
Fair comment.
Thank you. Good.
Have no one else on the list, so
Thank you.
you're dismissed. Motion by Councillor Sato, seconded by Mayor Thompson for receipt of the deputation. All in favor? Hands, please. Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. I guess the next presenter would be Gary Scanlon on the 27, 10.6. It's on the 2017 DCs.
Morning, Mr. Chair and members of council. Through you, Gary Scanlon is here from Watson and Associates. At the DC public meeting on May 28th, there was a question from Build regarding a pause and looking at what had occurred in both London and Barrie in their negotiations. Mr. Scanlon was part of those negotiations, so we've asked him this morning to give an update to council on that process and how it fits with our planning here at Peel.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, Mr. Chair and members of council, to be here. I've put together a short presentation just to give you a bit of a background on some of the issues that we're facing, both the City of London and the City of Barrie, and why we were brought in to help both the government as well as the developers find a way of moving ahead together with respect to building infrastructure and financing it. Obviously, I think yourselves, along with many other municipalities, have faced basically since the late 90s after local service realignment that there's been more issues from a financial perspective. The financial impact of growth is both on the capital side, trying to build the infrastructure in a timely manner, but there's also the added operating costs that come from that. Cash flow, since we have to build water, wastewater, and roads well in advance of the development, the cash flow burdens on the municipality are becoming sizable. Increasing development charge quantums, we talked about it. As you get further and further away from the water, you have to build infrastructure that's going farther away in order to get the water up there, and then the sewage backs. We've seen DC quantum going up. And then the development community need to be satisfied with all of these issues and are being asked now to help finance all of this infrastructure. So that with all of those factors, there's been a number of municipalities. I've noted some here: Halton, Londonderry, Milton, Bradford, West Gwillimbury, East Gwillimbury, Worcester, Stouffville. We've been brought in to help those municipalities deal with the development community and find ways that they can undertake the plans, build the infrastructure, get the financing at reasonable levels in order to ensure that everybody's moving together. I think these discussions have been very positive and really moving ahead from each development charge bylaw. I think we experience less and less problems because there's more and more discussions that are going on. We've been, each of the ones that we noted, we've been part of the negotiation process. Lynn Townsend was involved in the London and Barrie. In fact, her and I worked on behalf of the municipalities, but to engage both the municipality and the development community. But Lynn Townsend obviously has been a representative of the developers for many, many years. So she came with a very positive and very strong perspective from the development community. Obviously, we came with a very strong perspective of the municipalities. So putting those both together, I think we were able to find an approach to these issues for the City of London and Barrie. Just quickly, London's situation was one that really extends over many, many years. They started a process back in the 1980s. I'll explain it in a minute. And even with the change in the Development Charges Act in 1989 and further in 1997, they still continued their process. It was something the development community were comfortable with, and the city respected their wish and continued that process. We had actually suggested in 1997 that they move away from it, but the development community made representation, wanted to continue it. And right now, to most of Ontario, to explain the difference between what they were doing versus yourself, the development community always build what we call local services. What's internal to the subdivision, the internal roads, the water mains, the sewer, street lights, etc. That's what we call local services. So yourself and most municipalities have a definition of what's built by the developers. And then there's the rest of the services that are built for water, wastewater. To put it in your context, the city services, what the city had a development charge for and the projects they would control would be equivalent to arterial roads or to building the treatment plant and the big pipe that goes from Mississauga all the way to the north, or from the lake all the way to the north. That was really what was in what they call the CSRF, the city's development charge. Everything in between fell into this urban works category. And this urban works situation was there was still a development charge for it, but the development charge was paid for at the time of building permit. But the development community would build all of the infrastructure, and then they'd put a claim in, and they would then be drawing off of this reserve fund. So they really had control over construction of the infrastructure, the timing, where it was located, et cetera. So they were bringing on lands really at their timing. Big problem that occurred over time, and this is why we were probably recommending back in 1997 not to continue with it, was the fact that now the city was one-sized, but then through an official plan, actually an OMB process, they designated 50 years worth of growth in a wagon wheel. So now we're going out from the core, and we had all of this land being brought on. And the problem we observed was there was not a staging plan, there wasn't a logical way on which you would progress with the infrastructure. So all of the infrastructure was going in many different directions, more like a wagon wheel. And the problem is that the money was being invested, but the revenue that was coming back was at some point later in the game. We reached a point where they were $35 million in deficit. Just that portion of the fund was $35 million in deficit, and with the development that was coming on and the anticipated claims, within the next couple of years, this would jump to $100 million. So the development community was having problems with the cash flow. So we were brought in to help resolve this, and through the process, Lynn and I, it took us about 12 months to negotiate, but there's a number of different things we had to balance. And at the end of the day, we removed that Urban Works Fund. We put full control back to the city for all of the timing of the infrastructure to be constructed. Part of that process, we had a very close relationship in, we have an annual planning report that gets updated, what's coming on stream, when is it anticipated, what infrastructure needs to be built. So we lined up their capital budget and the planning process very close. And with that, we had obviously a strong financial plan that would be put into place. There was the problem of the $35 million in deficit. We planned for a 5-year build-out or buyout of those claims so that we reinstated the urban works, or we paid back all of the existing claims out of the old urban works. The other item was the fact that, as I say, we've developed a process that integrated really the planning, the engineering, and the financial plan quite closely together. We did recognize that the development community were taking on a little bit more on the their local services, really in the area of stormwater management. You build a storm, I'm the first guy in, I'm building stormwater management, but it may benefit some of the other landowners. So the city was also facilitating recovery of those lands through an approval process. At the end of the day, we reached really a balance between needs, to bring the lands on stream, et cetera. And it was actually quite a positive process. And we got ourselves out of a 1980 process. City of Barrie, a little bit different, slightly different driver. City of Barrie, one point, was the fastest growing municipality in Canada in the late 80s, early 90s. They've virtually built out, or sorry, they're reaching the point where to meet their places to grow population, they didn't have enough lands. So they annexed lands from Innisfil that brought on the equivalent of another 40,000 people plus some employment lands. They also had enough growth in their existing built boundary for another 40,000 people. So we could facilitate, say, 10 years worth of growth with the existing, and then they were bringing on another 10 years worth of growth through their annexation. When we took a look at it, we were looking at $4.1 billion over the next 18 years in the city's capital budget. 1.4 of that was to bring on the new lands, so to service water, wastewater, roads within the annexed lands, and some other services. The existing built boundary, we needed to service growth, another $1.1 billion, and the city had just issued $600 million in treatment debt for water treatment, wastewater treatment. So we had almost $3 billion, roughly over $3 billion that was there for growth. An emerging problem with many municipalities as well is asset management needs. Aging infrastructure, and you need to ensure that you're building it to keep the existing areas serviced with water, wastewater, roads, and perhaps other services. The critical to high, so the most imminent and the high priority projects currently totaled $1 billion. It was actually about another $2.4 billion. But what we, in low to medium needs, but we brought it down to $1 billion in the financial plan. That was the backdrop. When we take a look at adding all of that together, we were looking at just adding the annexed lands on top of the city's already planned process. We were going to push tax increases from a forecast 4% per year up to 7% per year. Water and wastewater, where they had already jumped up the rates by about 35% in the prior 2 years, we were looking at going from 4% up to 10%. So continuing increases on the rates. I neglected to put it on here, and I apologize. Just looking at the debt capacity in order to build all this infrastructure and look at normal collection timing and such, 46% debt capacity. The rules by the province are that you can't go past 25%. So it was impossible for the city to take on all of this infrastructure, all of the debt, and try and balance all of this. So we sat down with the development community and negotiated, because really the recommendations were, if we were going to allow the annexation lands developers to start to build, we needed assistance. Otherwise, we would have to stage them off 10 years from now. We'd have to be doing phasing. So they wanted to participate now, so we looked at how do we make this work. Once again, Lynn Townsend and myself, took us about 10 months. At the end of the day, what we had was, the development charges were actually going up by about 40%. So at the end of the day, the developers confirmed the level of increases were reasonable. We actually negotiated an added amount over and above the development charge, so there was an added capital contribution. where they would pay on average about $4,500 a unit. That capital cost or the capital contribution, similar to Milton, that added amount, it was solely for growth-related projects, okay, growth-related works. There was added, there's services that are exempt, so they were funding those services that were exempt. We had service standards that would be going up. Say, one of the problems is, say, in transit, which we're dealing with right now with the province and the development community and changes to the Development Charges Act, is transit service standards really don't function. So we went through and identified all of this, and they agreed to assisting with an extra $4,500 for every unit that was built. There was some minor projects that had to be advanced, and they said, we'll take on the benefit to existing on water and wastewater projects. They gave us cash flow to assist with the debt charges because we're already incurring huge deficits. We were paying it, and we were basically depleting our reserves in order to pay those debt charges, so we minimized the impact on rates. And basically, at the end of the day, we resolved how we were going to get into cash flow agreements to accelerate the timing. At the end of the day, the conclusion was we brought debt capacity down to around 20%. The city wanted to be at least leave themselves 5% hedge for any unforeseen problems. And then the tax and rate increases were brought back to the original 4% that they had planned upon. It's still in excess of inflation, but it's what they need to do to address their asset management issues. Both sides, I think, declared it a win-win because we're able to work through this. Key things on all of this was that the goal was to, in part, distribute risk. Obviously, municipalities investing a lot in infrastructure. You want to make sure that you're investing it where the lands will be built and brought on stream as quickly as possible. You don't want to be building here, infrastructure over here, but the need for growth is actually elsewhere. Development community, the discussions on timing, really what we were doing was once again bringing in planning, infrastructure, and finance or engineering together in order to make sure that we were coordinating it as best as possible. I think at the end of the day, when we go through with the DC process, we didn't have any objections, and I think we got a really positive feedback during the public process. As I say, observations, commentary. There's a lot of things that are positive there that we can draw on. There are some differences that we'd have to see if we were moving through in a regional sense. Probably the key one is the fact that we were dealing with two single-tier municipalities who have full control over planning. Moving forward, it would have to be almost like a three-party situation. We're ensuring that the region and the local municipalities and the development community were working together in a coordinated fashion so we can ensure that the communication between planning, engineering, finance were all in good stead. One of the positive things with Peel, you're much larger, you have a much larger financial base, you can take on a little more financial risk than what they were able to do, but I think they're still looking at the amount of infrastructure you need to build. There's financial exposure there. London, obviously, as I noted, they had a historic process. It needed reform. We went through that and brought them into what most municipalities in Ontario do today. And then, as I say, the asset management plans really need to be integrated. It's part of all of this because you have to ensure that you're dealing with your existing as part of your future. I think Build, as was noted by Dave, Build had suggested a similar type of process be considered, something that we would look at for perhaps the fall and look with a view of looking at the 2041. I think that's a very positive thing. Obviously, there's changes, there's things evolving that will change the master plans. What I'd identify in the next couple of slides is the plans that we have today versus what we're seeing on the ground from a regional perspective for servicing. These things are in a state of flux. They continue to evolve, and we need to make sure that the infrastructure and the communication from the planning, predominantly from the local, are being coordinated in a consistent fashion. Give you a couple of examples where we want to make sure that we're evolving together. This is one where the timing of the infrastructure has changed, so the region has to switch gears through the capital budget process in order to accommodate these changes. You can see on the left that hatched area, the lines, was originally provided to the region when we were considering the infrastructure. They'd build, the added population would be roughly about 4,500 people. You can see right now we've got a development request just for that yellowed area, which is maybe about 40%, maybe about 1/3, and they've got about 3,600 people. So we've got 75% of the development occurring only on about 1/3 of the land area. So we're shifting. Obviously, the engineers look at that and go, gee, we didn't size the pipes to accommodate that. Similarly, on the right-hand side, you can see by 2041, that whole area was planned for 1,200. Just those two little green areas are already at 1,400. So we're out of step in ensuring the infrastructure and the planning are integrating in a consistent and constant basis. A couple of more examples. These are employment lands converting to residential. You see on the left-hand side, you can see the green area is the current request, about 1,150 people. Maybe you can't see the green plus that red area to the bottom originally was supposed to be for 500. So we'd expect that green plus that red area will probably be in the realm of about 1,700 people. Not a big difference for a change in industrial land, but what's flipped is the timing. Normally the industrial would be a longer, and residential normally need it. So this activated the timing, and actually this project, in conjunction with some of the other developments, which are on the right-hand side, you can see we've got another situation where the whole area was planned for about 1,600 people, and just the green area, we're already at about 2,700. So we haven't even got, we're probably at, once again, 40% of the lands, and we're changing. So when you're looking at these development areas, the planning has to be integrated closer with the financing, and we have to make, with the engineering, and we have to make sure the financial planning is there to help build the infrastructure on a timely basis. This last one is just identifying a flip of timing. We had post-2021 for this area. It's now being advanced or being considered for 2018. Same population generally, a little over 19,000 in both cases, but once again, we're shifting by about 3 or 4 years the timing of the infrastructure needs. So it just says that what's being advanced by BUILD and what we're looking at is looking at a closer integration between the local municipalities planning, regional planning, engineering, and finance. Yeah, so I think, the infrastructure staging, development phasing, becoming more complex. In the south, we're having to deal with intensification. The area for Mississauga, Mississauga Center is intensifying. We're reaching a point where the services in that area are going to have to be improved. We've got new areas in Brampton, but it's going across the northern part. We've got new areas going into Caledon. So we've got all these different needs and different ways how we're going to service them, so we have to deal with them. We're suggesting collaborative approach between the 3 different parties, locals, region, and the development community, and really leveraging the suggestion by BUILD to move in this direction. One other thing is that there are changes that we'll be looking to that may come from Bill 73 that's may change the structure a little bit in the areas of solid waste diversion or waste diversion and in transit, but we'll deal with those as we move through. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to engage any further questions, or did you want to go to yours next?
No, I think we'll take them.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Gary. Councillor Sato.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. That was very, very informative. and very clear, so thank you.
Thank you.
One question, you showed maps of various subdivisions, development areas where there was a planned growth of, 1,200, 1,300, and you already had over 2,000. To what extent were OMB decisions, or could OMB decisions influence anything that we do here? Because we're starting to see that where we plan, particularly with Peel, with our water sewer, we plan our infrastructure and our budgets and our development charges based on a projected development, particularly as it relates to infill development. And what we're starting to see is, a jump ahead where one location has been allocated so many units. The region says, yes, we've accommodated that in our growth plan. We've, charged DCs. Then another developer comes in, wants to build the same number somewhere else, goes to the OMB, and the OMB is making the decision, which totally throws off our projections and our plans. How can we deal with that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think that's part of what we want to discuss is this process. Even though you've got the OMB perhaps giving approval, is the servicing adequate and what's the financial plan? So that they may be accelerating the timing of infrastructure. And the current system right now, there's not the close relationship between triggering the development and maybe triggering the payment of extending that infrastructure. So part of this process, and we'll, with your indulgence, we'll come back with a bit more of a plan. But I think this is what we want to embrace, is that those changes, and if you change, that'll be part of our policies. What does that do to front-ending different works, and what's the impact on others?
Okay, because I'm facing that right now, and unfortunately, the region, because our growth plan says we can accommodate 700 units, say, without upgrading anything, there's no comment on an application saying we oppose it. But then you go back and you look at the area that was designed to accommodate that, and they're out.
And I agree totally. They may have, they have 1/3 of the development, but they've taken the full servicing allocation. So what does that do to the rest of the areas? And those, as I say, that's part of what we want to embrace as part of this discussion process. What does it do in bringing closer together the parties so that we're working together and making sure we're maximizing the infrastructure that we build, but we're also ensuring that if you're there's a financial commitment to that from the development community relative to all of that infrastructure needs.
And where in your process, and I may have missed it, but I didn't think I saw it in your slides, where in your process is there an opportunity for the development industry to sit down with members of council, whether it's, and I don't mean in a committee structure, in an informal coordinated session by yourself or Lynn or whoever, to discuss issues before they get to the stage where we're ready to approve?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if we follow what we did in Barrie, we had our engagement with council, but then we had a very large public information session that had members of council there as well as members of the development community. And then we engaged probably about 2/3 the way of the process, and then at the end of the process. So we had several collective discussions through that piece. I think it's important. I think number one, you would probably want to understand, some of the direct concerns. Sometimes they're a little bit too much in the minutia, but obviously, what comes out of it is there's a global issues that have to be dealt with at the municipal level as well as at the local level, or the developer level, and what we're trying to do is balance them all. So
thank you.
Thanks very much, Gary, for your presentation. Well done. I'm going to suggest to council, we've brought forward 10.5, 10.6, 10.7. So what I'd like to suggest, so that we stay, for clarity, and that we stay focused on certainly the motion that was presented by Councillor Sato, is that 10.5 is in respect of a historical analysis regarding development charges, and that report's before us, and it's here for receipt only. So I'm going to ask that if someone would be kind enough to
Move
move
receipt.
that. Councillor Sato, and seconded by Councillor McFadden. All in favor of that? Opposed, if any? Then on 10.6, which was the presentation that was just made by Gary Scanlon, I would ask that someone move receipt of that presentation. Councillor Moore, seconded by Mayor Crombie. All in favor of that? There were also some added correspondence, which was 11.3, 11.4, and 11.5. If Councillor Palesh, you'd be kind enough to move receipt of that. And seconded by Councillor, or Mayor Jeffrey. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Then with,
Sorry, I was trying to add something to 10.7 if I could.
we're not on that yet. Yeah, no. So on 10.6, which was the presentation, within that, this is in relation to the 2017 development charge process as outlined by Gary Scanlon. So I would ask if someone would be kind enough to move the recommendations that are within that. Okay, Mayor Thompson, and seconded by Councillor Starr. All in favor of that? Opposed, if any? That'll bring us to 10.7, and we'll start with the presentation by David Bingham. But before we do, Mayor Thompson, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about 10.7 to the report. I would just like to add it, but I'll let the delegation go
Yeah,
first.
okay.
And then I'll bring that recommendation after.
All right, great, thank you. David, you get the floor. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my thanks to members of council for this opportunity to provide the 2015 Development Charges Bylaw for consideration and approval. As noted previously, following this bylaw update, regional staff will re-engage on the growth management program work using the 2041 population and employment forecasts. With your approval of the companion report that Mr. Scanlon spoke to, that work will result in a negotiated approach with the areas and the development industry on the staging of infrastructure and the phasing of growth to 2041. This bylaw update, in the meantime, is largely a technical one to keep the DC rates up to date and the DC program financially sustainable, in addition to advancing the region's intensification and affordable housing objectives. The presentation will focus on the changes since my presentation at the public meeting, starting at the high-level cost changes, their impact on the rates, and finally, the importance of the timing of this update. The region has long committed to working with the development community and their technical consultants in reviewing the background study and bringing forward reasonable adjustments for Council's consideration. Since the May 28th public meeting, based on further discussions, it is proposed that $58.7 million, or almost 5.2% of the road servicing costs, be carried forward to the post-bylaw period. This reflects the exclusion of no fixed place of work estimates from the employment forecasts. The balance of the cost changes since the public meeting are for individual projects where estimates came in higher or lower than those originally in the background study, and that reflects a net increase in costs of $17.3 million. Together, these result in further reductions of $41 million since the public meeting. As noted at the public meeting, a significant portion of the increase in residential rates is driven by the growing number of persons per unit, or PPUs, in Peel, based on the latest Statistics Canada census. Watson's analysis shows more people on average are occupying residential units in Peel. This is in contrast to other regional municipalities across the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area, where average PPU levels have declined in recent years. This slide shows the single and semi-category, where the increase in PPUs drives almost 60% of the rate change. On this slide, we show our updated rates since the public meeting. This is slightly different from the one that was sent out originally in your agenda. This consistently shows the regional DC rates, including Peel Regional Police. The $41 million cost reduction since the public meeting has resulted in lower rates of between $139 and $344 per residential unit, and between 51 cents and $3.98 per square meter for non-res. The residential charge per capita comparison on this slide shows that when you factor out the higher Peel PPUs, the overall per capita DC charges in Peel are very comparable to our GTA peers, where regional DC charges were generally updated 3 years ago. Here we show how the higher PPUs in Peel push our rates higher on a per unit basis. This slide is for singles and semis and reflects Peel's average PPU of 4.15 based on the latest census. On the industrial side, Peel's DC rates have dropped about 2% and remain very competitive with our GTA peers. This results mostly from the fact that Peel's industrial floor space per worker has increased to 149 square meters from 90 square meters in the 2012 background study. As noted in Mr. Scanlon's presentation on the experience in London and Barrie, the new approach to consultation works well in a process where land use planning, master service planning are integrated with financial options planning and include a service allocation methodology. In Peel's case, given our two-tier structure, unlike Barrie and London, we must include our area municipalities in this process. As Mr. Scanlon noted, the consultations in Barrie and London each took about 1 year. And lastly, the legislation and regulations for Bill 73 are unlikely to be enforced until next year, and these are expected to have implications for financing options. For these reasons, a pause to the fall or end of the year is not practical. Approval of the DC bylaw now will generate almost $200 million in additional funding over the next 2 years, $96 million from DC rate revenue and $100 million in advance payment collection from the development industry. Without that additional funding, the region must either approve an additional $200 million in borrowing or reduce capital project spending by about $200 million over the next 2 years. This slide lists some of the potential projects that could be delayed and that would impact development in the Mississauga City Centre, like those of Rogers Real Estate, Rio Trin Properties, Solmar, and Beef Developments, Zone 6 developments in South Caledon and North Brampton, and the Countryside Villages and Mayfield West 1 secondary plans. Should this option be taken, staff would need to report back to Council for their direction on which projects to delay in the next 2 years. Staff recommends proceeding with approval of the bylaw today, and as you have already approved, the report for the 2017 DC process with a negotiated approach with the areas and development industry. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I would ask that you stick to questions of the deputy and/or staff regarding the report first, and then we'll bring forward the motion, and we can get into comments and debate with respect to the motion at that time. First on the list is Mayor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The one thing is you don't know what the revenue loss would be for even just this year if we don't put this in place today? For a residential site, I guess, is where we're...
Through you, Mr. Chair, we had estimated at the public meeting that a delay to the fall to September would be about $22 million. We're expecting probably about an additional $16 million if that drags out to the end of the year.
Okay. My second question is, the employment is one that we need to get corrected quickly. We now have the figures in. And do you have any idea what that impact's going to be if we don't get that into place? Because I do think that's a big concern for all of us.
Are you thinking, sorry.
Like for the employment sector, right? There's a bit of a reduction there.
The 2040, out to 2041?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and that's, I think, through you, Mr. Chair, why it's important that we look at the integration of the financing options, the on-the-ground planning with the areas, and the population forecast out of the province, because as you're aware, Mr. Mayor, through Growth Management Committee, there is considerable concern about us meeting our employment targets out to 2041.
Yeah, and I think that's a big concern, so I think it would help, even going forward, having this in place right now. My other question too is the Victoria feeder main reservoir does have an impact on Caledon, but it does on Brampton as well.
And that's why I mentioned both South Caledon and North Brampton, because the water is uphill in order to get the pressure in people's homes and businesses.
So I do know that's a big impact. The one thing to the deputant, Mr. Chairman, I just got one thing that I would like to add to the clause on the recommendation of 10.7, since it's on the floor. Can I bring that forward now?
I don't know, I'd ask, do we go through the questions first and then you can
Come
add
back
it?
on after that?
Yeah, I'll put you
Okay.
back on.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Sato.
Thank you. We have deferred our development charges several times, and over the last 24 years, I could count a lot of times that we have deferred for various reasons, or we have deferred certain parts of the development charges. We always get estimates and assumptions by staff of what we're going to lose, what it's going to cost the region. But I've never seen anything come back to say, after the fact, when we have moved forward, how much we actually did lose, or if we lost anything. And, you know, losing money is an assumption that you're going to have development during that period of time. And if the development wasn't going to come forward anyway, we wouldn't have received the DCs. So, you know, 22 million, it's an assumption. Have you done any historical reviews as to what previous, and I could probably, I don't know, at least 3 or 4 times we have deferred 4 to 6 months and sometimes even longer than that in order to have further discussion. So what have we actually lost on each one of those? And I probably don't expect you to have that information here today for each development charges, but what are you basing your 22 million on?
What we're basing it on is the fact that with the known increase in the rates, developers that are in a position where they have their plans, their secondary plans approved, will move forward to pull those building permits at the
Right.
lower rates now.
Yeah.
And we've seen that, we definitely saw that 3 years ago. It's a much more significant increase in the rates. There was some costing, I believe it actually came back to council, but we can dig those reports up and refer them back to you.
Okay. I don't recall it as being, my recollection, I don't recall it as being as high as what was originally projected, because we did change on the last one, we changed when the DCs would click in on some of them.
As you may, through you, Mr. Chair, as you may remember, Councillor, in the September meeting in 2012, the development community was looking for further transition.
Yes.
We'd moved from July to September. They were looking for further transition on residential, and the presentations from the CFO at that time were speaking to those costs if those residential
Right.
Deferrals or transition occurred again. Council chose just to transition the office and industrial class at that time. So
Right.
that would be part of the reason why the full impact that we had originally
we just
forecast
don't
didn't
know.
come to.
Yeah, so we don't know those numbers. Okay,
Councillor
thank you.
Sato, I believe the commissioner would like to make a comment, if you may.
And I think we have reported, I think we have reported back to council, but I think the range for 2012, the transition cost was in the range of about plus or minus $25 million, based on the permits being pulled in advance of
Right.
the
industrial.
the delayed timing.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Just a couple of questions on, I'm speaking to the report, correct? The report's
No,
before us?
ask questions with respect to the report. You can
With
speak.
respect
Yeah,
to
you
the
can speak
report?
for it. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so on 10.7-4, when you did your technical review and adjustment, it says here that you did consult with Build. So is that as a result of the motion that was passed last June? leading up to your report and your recommendations today?
This whole update to the bylaw is based on the resolution by council last June. With the Growth Management Committee, we were engaged in planning to 2041, including new financial options. As some of the information came forward at Growth Management on the financial options and our current DC collections, particularly on the employment side, and members of Growth Committee felt that we should not wait until the 2041 planning was completed and resulted in a 2017 bylaw. We needed to update the DC bylaw now based on 2031 and then get back on the 2041 track to update the bylaw and the planning for that.
That's fine, but you did consult?
We've consulted extensively with the industry. Actually, I believe...
On 10.7-4, I think you've got
Yeah,
some
in
comments.
one of them, we listed a number of the meetings we had with the development community. Actually, it's in 10.6.3. On 10.6.3, we list a number of the consultations we've had with Build and their consultants, specifically on the 2015 bylaw and background study.
Okay. And I recall a few years or several years ago when we dealt with development charges increases, we were able to, at one point, the industry came in and they asked us to sort of phase it in and not bring the full increase on all at once, which I believe we did do that.
In 2007, that was the case, yes.
Right. You know, at that time, I guess we were in a much better financial position here at the region to do that.
We were. I think one of the big differences this time is a lot of the increase, especially for single family, is driven by the PPUs. Those are demographic changes.
Right.
And if fundamentally we want a separate category for single and semi, at some point we sort of have to bite the bullet and make that change. And if you look at the per capita changes in Peel's recent history, this is a relatively modest increase in costs. And it's really the demographics that are driving the per unit changes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Development charges has never been something that I've ever really wanted to delve into. I just tend to trust what staff tells us and make decisions based more on logic than on the actual numbers. But we did have a meeting with Build, a few members of Brampton's Regional Council, and when I coupled the discussion that we had with them in regards to Mr. Watson's, is it Mr. Watson? Yeah, Mr. Watson's discussion this morning, it just seems to me that there is so much sense for us to actually sit down with the development industry. I mean, we are in this together. As a municipality, we cannot continue to grow, and grow, in fact, is a good thing for us, without the development charges to pay for the infrastructure. The developers can't build without the region of Peel working with them and putting in the infrastructure. So we really are partners in this. We're in a different space than Barrie and London, but I do think that as a region, we do have to start looking at ways of doing things differently. And I think that's what the development industry is asking us, the opportunity to sit down and take a look at a way that we as a region can work in partnership with them to do things differently. It's my understanding that the dollars are never lost. In fact, the dollars that we don't collect in one development charge period, we can actually pick up in the next development charge period. So in fact, if we spend more money to put the infrastructure in place in one development charge period, those dollars are actually incorporated into the next development charge period, so that there is no loss to the municipality. So can I ask if that is accurate?
Through you, Mr. Chair, in the total planning horizon, that is accurate. We're speaking here to the $200 million we would get in funding in the next 2 years. The DC's revenue and the advance of borrowing from the development community by collecting earlier. Those funds, true, will eventually be collected, but if our next bylaw is out to 2041, instead of collecting it in the next 2 years, we're going to collect that money out to 2041. It's going to get spread out to 2041. And that's why we would need to borrow the $200 million in the next 2 years, or push off projects in the next 2 years so that we can have that funding out to 2041.
Well, my understanding is, though, that this is a short period pause that is going to give some, allow for some intensive negotiation with the development industry. All of the background studies have been done. All of the work has been done. It's just a matter of timing and looking for some more creative ways for us as a region to not actually have to debenture costs, but perhaps look at front-end financing and other ways. And in fact, at the end of the day, the development industry may have to upfront costs sooner than they would with going with the old way that we have collected development charges.
Through you, Mr. Chair, you may recall Mr. Steedman in his presentation spoke of Halton and how it was 2 processes and didn't really work when the financing was done at the end. And as you've just spoken, we've done the background study. The planning out to 2031 has been done, both land use planning and master servicing planning. It really doesn't work with the system to now, at the end, try to, in a very short period of time, rejig the financing on works that are largely underway, both our capital works and, in most cases, most of the secondary plans have been approved for this work.
Councillor Moss, I'm going to ask that the commissioner, he had his name up. Did you want to respond, Steve?
Just if I can add some clarity to the issue of whether or not we lose the money or not. In between now and, say, 2017, there may be 10 or 12,000 residential permits pulled. If we delay the DC bylaw, those permits that are pulled will pay the discounted rate, so they're not paying the full cost. We can never recover against those permits that are being pulled between now and that point in time when the bylaw is passed. So we would lose it from those permits, and that cost then gets added to an increasing rate as a baseline increase on the next rate.
Okay, so your responses to me.
Actually, Councillor Miles, David would like to respond to that as well, just before you go on.
Just a fine point on that issue. We have as practice added, as Steve has said, the uncollected, the lost amount of money onto the beginning of the next bylaw. During discussions with the industry this time, they have challenged the legality of us doing that. So while it has been something that has been going on, and it's been building and building, and we've heard members of the industry say to us, you don't want to be the person buying the last house in Peel because of all this money being pushed forward through these transition periods. So while it has been the custom to start it off the new bylaw with money that was not collected in the old bylaw, that habit has been now challenged, well, not legally challenged, but the question has been raised as to whether or not we have the legal authority to do that.
Okay, so your responses to me keep dealing with this in terms of 2 years or 3 years, when in fact what Bill is asking for is a couple of months. And that is what Councillor Sato's motion is. It's a couple of months in order to sit down and find ways to better rationalize our development charges for the future. So this isn't just for today. This is trying to find a better way for the region of Peel to partner with the development industry to look at all of the different tools that are needed insofar as planning, capital projects, financing, timing, etc., to better better serve this municipality. I just have a hard time accepting that that isn't the right thing to do. So I'm going to leave my comments at that and listen to what others have to say.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Starr.
Yeah, the question I have is with respect to the demographics, and if I recall, Mr. Scanlon, a number of years ago, the number was about 3.2, and you know it's a floating number. Now we're up to 415. That's a massive increase, and I wonder how you can break that out, or what the I guess what the data shows. Is it just in the new semis and townhouses? I mean, where is this coming from, and what data do we have to show that the rest of the population maybe is going down because we have a senior component which is getting less population, the PPU, in a certain segment of the demographic population. And I find it hard to understand how you're moving this this ghost around and coming up with a number. Did I explain myself okay?
Very well. Through you, Mr. Chair, very well. If you have an opportunity, and I'll just reference the page and then you can take a look at it. It's page A8, it's the appendix, the 8th, A-8 in our background study. What our firm does, and we've done this for probably over 20 years now, is we invest in a special run from Statistics Canada. And we ask them to analyze all the information, and they can break down we break down singles and semi-detached, so low, medium, and high density units. And we ask them to categorize it and then break it down by age. So 1 to 5 years, 6 to 10, so we have this age, and then we ask them as well, break it down by bedroom size. So we have 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. So we pay to have them analyze all of this and provide us for all municipalities in Ontario. From that information, that is where the persons per unit come from. So we average it over a 20-year planning horizon, which is generally our planning horizon. And what you normally see is in new houses, it'll actually start, for the brand new houses, it may start here and it'll actually go up a bit because they, newer couples or whatever getting in, and then the persons per unit go up. And then as the house ages over time, then the person per unit declines. Good example is I built my house 18 years ago. I have 3 kids, so the kids were in there, so I had a PPU of 5. There was 5 of us. I've been fortunate enough to get them out of the house. I haven't killed them off, I've just encouraged them to move on. So now we're empty nesters, we're at 2 persons per unit. So that natural change over time is what's captured in the Statistics Canada data. As I say, we've got it for low, medium, and high density units by age, by bedrooms. So that is from that information that we're using as the persons per unit data for the development charges. So it's the newer homes, it's for that specific category, and that's where the information comes from.
Just based on that, and by the way, I just want to make a comment. I do agree with some sort of deferral and working with the stakeholders, whoever they are, because we're seeing a PPU, say, increasing of 18% using the numbers you have. Yet the increase for the development charges is a lot more than that. And it has been growing. I mean, when we saw the price of a house, I saw the chart, I guess that's been used a couple of times, where a price of a house has moved from, say, let's use the number 300 to 600,000 over the last 10 years. That's probably in here someplace in the background studies. Yet the development charges, which have not kept pace, have gone up 600%. And so I think the assumption it was made that, I think you said it is, it's the end user that finally pays, and you don't want to be the final person buying the final house in 2081. To me, there's inequity here someplace, and whether we haven't caught up with whatever, I think that's one of my prime reasons for taking a real good look, because we seem to be chasing. And unless we're doing a better job now, we're going to be doing this again, and then you're going to come to us now in 2 years from now saying, let's take a look at these charges again because we're not following up. I just think that a delay, or not a delay, but a constructive delay of a period of time is so important that we all get a handle on this. I don't know if there's any other further data we need with respect to the change in the demographics. To me, that's a point that we have to take a look at, and I think we have to let the stakeholders take a look at that too. But to me, I think there's a lot of key considerations here, and I think with the motion that's being brought forward, I agree with it 100%. So I just think that we all have to work together on this, and whether there's a separate committee or whether it's through growth management or whatever, we just have to take a better look at it. Because we are getting caught in this crunch, and as we keep moving, it's not going to get better. So.
If I may, through you, Mr. Chair, as indicated on the slide, our actual costs for the region have gone up about 12.8%. Compounded with the PPU change on single family ends up with a 33% increase in the DC rate. So about 60% is from the PPU, about 40% is from our costs. That 12% increase is much smaller than what we have had in the last two DC bylaw updates here. And as Mr. Scanlon spoke to at the public meeting, as you may recall, that goes back to the fact that overcapacity in the region's pipes that we inherited from the province is gone, that Walkerton has brought in much higher standards for water and wastewater treatment, et cetera.
We should sue the province.
Thank you. Councillor Palashi.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. I agree with Councillor Starr's comments, and I think that I can support this resolution, but I need to kind of understand why are we not able to bridge the interim before before all parties come together and just have this increase until we actually come to a resolution with the industry.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it goes back to the comments that Mr. Steedman made about the experience in Halton, where they went through the planning process and they worked up their DC and then tried to bring in a financing plan at the end, and that didn't work particularly well. What we really want to see is the financing options are part of the growth management and the master servicing planning. And really, that works well with the 2041, where we're getting new population and new employment in new areas to be developed. Whereas this bylaw update, which is an update on the 2031A numbers, that work was done long ago, and there really isn't we can't undo I don't think we can undo some secondary plan approvals, or don't want to undo some secondary plan approvals to get back into a situation where we would look at what are the front-end financing and other options that we would try to do in, a 3 or 4 month period.
I'm still not understanding why the two wouldn't work at the financing level. You said that Halton tried it and it didn't work. What exactly is the fact that it didn't commingle?
This is what I've heard actually from industry representatives, is that they had to get involved with both Halton and the development industry in helping straighten out the issue, and that it worked much better the next time when the financing options were an input to the planning process as opposed to being tacked on the end.
So this resolution here today before us passes, and then industry comes together in whatever, 4, 5, 6 months, whatever it is.
No,
2 months? 2 months?
1 month.
1 month, okay, 1 month. And it's come to conclusion that DCs have to come up. Then what are we looking at? What kind of implications on the financing does it have then?
And if it is just until September, then it's about the $22 million that we estimated at the public meeting.
And that $22 million, and back in 2012, we had a $25 million. Are we going to see an influx in the permits? Bear with me, it was a late night last night. Sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is definitely what we saw in 2012.
We did.
There was a rush to the gates, much to our area partners' chagrin, because it's building permits that trigger that. So it's the front lines in the areas that face that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Thompson.
Yeah, I think the report's really well explanatory, and I think this is what we said the last time is when we gave the break, that this is what we agreed to get everybody to buy in. So we're delivering on what we've agreed to. And I got to say, you guys have done a great report, and I'm willing to move it, Mr. Chairman, this delegation and this report. But what I would like to ask is if I could add a clause to the report, if I can go there now. Because the I like just to add.
So then we can do the amended.
I just like to add a paragraph.
Yeah, okay, that's appropriate. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The motion is on the floor.
No, he can add it, but then we go to.
Yeah, then it goes to, then it
Councillor
fits in
Sato's
very
motion
well.
first.
Just all I'm doing is adding to the report, basically on the front page on your recommendations. I would like to add a paragraph if I could.
Yeah, that's permissible.
And as it says here, oh, here, we got it here? Yes, we do. Yeah, right there. Okay, so you guys are good. Thank you. At least I don't have to read it, and I know if everybody could abide to that. And I know Councillor Ennis is, willing to second if we need to move it as a motion or not, I don't know.
Okay,
And then the deferral.
okay, we're going to vote on this amendment, but then the first motion that comes, because this is just to amend the report, then the
Yeah.
first motion that will come forward is the motion by Councillor
Right.
Sato.
Right, and that's what I'm wanting to do,
Right.
because
You just
as
want
it goes forward.
You want it in there that,
Yeah.
I understand. Okay.
That's all I'm doing is,
Okay,
because it came from the Growth Management Committee, and
All in favor then of this amendment in the report? Carried. I'll move to Councillor Sato.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have my motion that has been distributed, and in conversation with the clerk and with David, trying to see if we could move the meeting up. Originally, I was looking at September 17th, and then we would report back in November. Staff feel that if we hold the meeting with the industry in September, we could report back on October 8th, which gains another month, or reduces it by a month. Alternatively, if members of council would be available to meet in August, August 13th, we could report back to the council meeting of September 10th, which moves it back another month if there are concerns about amounts being lost. So I'm going to amend, and hopefully we would get enough members of council who would be would be available during that week to meet. And the industry that have asked for the meeting, you'll just have to make sure that you have people there on that date. So I'm going to change amend it to say that it be deferred until the, what did I just say, September 10th council meeting. So that paragraph would be September 10th, and that the meeting be convened on August 13th, which is a Thursday, Regional Reserve Day. And then the last paragraph would be that staff report back on the outcome of the meeting at the September 10th Regional Council meeting. That way, I always feel if you set a date, you set a deadline, you can get a lot done in one meeting. And I think all we need is one opportunity for members of council to sit down with the industry, with an external coordinator to lead the discussion and to, I hate using the word facilitate, but that's basically what they are doing. We have some excellent external people who have led the region in our strategic planning, and perhaps even the consultant that is being hired for the 2017 could lead that discussion. The reason I am not saying to refer it to the Growth Committee is that conversation cannot proceed the same way when you are covered by procedural bylaw or if a member of council is chairing the meeting. I think we need to have that opportunity for open, frank discussion with those members of council who wish to participate, with the development industry, those stakeholders who want to be involved, led by an external person, that we can have a fulsome discussion, everything can be put on the table, and at the end of the day, I had mentioned, because several of us also met with some of the representatives from Build and heard what they had to say. And my comment was, at the end of the day, after this meeting, we may come back and recommend that instead of $37,000, it be $39,000. So if you're willing to go for that, we're willing to go for that. But I think we do need that discussion, albeit that the Growth Committee has been looking at this. You know, this happens pretty well every time. Every development charge bylaw since I've been on council, and that's a long time, and Nando, you'll recall this, every single time we get all of these issues coming up a month or 2 months before we're expected to pass the bylaw, and then we're trying to play catch up, have meetings, find out the issues. So I think if we take our time, I like what's being proposed for 2017, because that process will include that discussion, which we haven't done before. So I would hope that members of council would support that. It's a very short transition. I think we can get a lot done in the next 2 months, bring it back to council in September, and then we don't have to be looking at an assumed 22 million. I think it would be very small. And I guess because I'm moving the motion, I would volunteer to sit on that committee. I was told I had to.
That's a requirement. Two things I need. It's clear with respect to the amendments that you've just made. I do need a seconder.
Yeah, Councillor Rask.
Okay, Councillor Rask, good. And then yourself will sit on that committee. And I think before I go to other speakers, I'd like to see a show of hands of who would like to be, so the clerk can record.
I think every council member should.
Well, if it's everyone, it's a council
You
meeting.
can't have everyone.
If it's
You
over,
can't have everyone.
if it's over 12, yeah.
No,
No,
no.
that isn't the intent.
No,
That
Alan,
isn't the
that's
intent.
what we want to avoid.
Yeah.
Have them stand on.
Can we get 3
You
from
know-
each municipality?
To make it easier for the clerk and myself, if you could just, stand, I guess, so I can see who's wants to, if you're
Wants to be
interested in
on it.
sitting on it.
It's not have quorum.
Linda backs up.
Are you standing or sitting?
Sure where she's standing.
We could use one. We're not voting. We're not voting. We're volunteering to sit on the committee. Can we get one more from Brampton? Thank you.
Okay, I'm down. Where to go?
Yeah.
I don't know. We're going to find out.
Many we got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
That's, we're just, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, we have two or three from each municipality is enough.
Somebody put the music on, we'll play musical chairs or something.
3 from each municipality works.
So that's not
Yeah,
quorum,
no,
so that's okay.
we're not at quorum, so
Yeah.
that'll work.
We've got 3, 3, and 3.
That works. Thanks so much.
That's 3, 3, and 3. That works. Good.
All right. Okay.
No,
Oh, so 3 in your chair, okay.
no, I'm not chair.
So-
There's no chair.
We have Councillor Sato, Mayor Crombie, Councillor Carlson,
Oh, were you
Councillor
on?
Groves,
You were
Councillor
on.
Innes, Councillor
No.
Moore, Councillor Palashi. All right, that's why I'm reading them off, just to make sure.
Right, sorry.
I'll start again. We have
Yeah.
Councillor Sato, Councillor Carlson, Councillor Groves, Councillor Innes, Councillor Moore, Councillor Palashi, Councillor Starr, and Mayor Thompson. And Councillor,
Miss me on purpose because I challenged the chair.
yeah, I was looking for another challenge. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Now,
Yeah, never mind.
we'll go to Councillor Yanika.
Well, I appreciate the attempt at a compromise, and I think I can go along with it. But Councillor Sada, you've given me the first segue into the brief comments that I want to try and make. Is you're absolutely right. Every time this issue comes up, it's another iteration of Groundhog Day. This has never not happened. This has never not happened. And I've said before, and I'll say again. So just allow me 60 seconds. I don't have a problem with levies. I've never had a problem. I have no problem with development charges. The problem I have is I got a bunch of people that want to keep slamming 2,500 units on a few acres of land in my ward wherever they can find a little piece of land. That's the problem I have. And I've got more that want me to enjoy my summer with them in my office talking about, Nando, the LRT, can we put another 1,200 here? Nando, you found an acre over here. Can I put 300 here? Nando, and by the way, none of them bring up levies. They love the privilege of being able to develop. And they should. The other point that I've always said about levies, and the old adage used to be years ago, it's the Ferrari argument. Never bought one, I never will be able to, but I've been told that if one goes in to buy a Ferrari, nobody in history has ever said, it's kind of expensive, I can afford it, but the taxes, they blow the deal out of the water for me. It never happens. If you can afford the Ferrari, you can afford the taxes and the levies. And I've never in all my years put a gun to somebody's head, come in my office, goddammit, rezone a piece of land and build, and then pay me the levies. I've never done it. But they just keep coming. So it's the cost of doing business. We've been over this before. Staff, you presented it very, very well, and I'm allowed to be a little more crusty. I think what you're saying in your much more gentlemanly way is, what the hell am I going to do with these people over the next 90 days? Like, what do you want me to tell you? You haven't said it, but I will say it for you. Because you've highlighted it very, very well. I get it. This is one of the simple, there's no low-hanging fruit in this in all the years. You build, you need pipes, you need road, you need water, you need sewer. There's no magic equation as to how you build it. It costs this much. Now someone has to pay. Do you want me to go to the people who already live, that have already paid the freight, that don't want your development to begin with and say, hey, by definition, if they ain't paying the freight, you have to in your regular taxes? Are you kidding me? So like, send you back to look at it. Great. I don't know what you're going to come back with, but, in the spirit of cooperation, you've struck a committee. I will say this, something that does resonate in a piece with me, and I wish I was smart enough to know what Phil King says all the time, but very few people are, I think. He makes a great point, if I can get my head around, how the nature of the non-res is an issue and the nature of the structures that you have. And I'm not smart enough to understand his point fully. That might be something I might wish to look at a little bit more, because the business employment lands and all those types of issues, I get that and the importance of having employment lands in your community. But you seem to have struck the committee. I can live with that. I'm hoping you're back in September because the meter's running. But with the greatest of respect, I think you're just rearranging lawn chairs on the Titanic, because it always ends up that way, it seems to me. And we've just lost another 2 months of collecting money. And my two colleagues are more right than I am on this, and I hear you. But I'm willing to go along, but I don't know what to change. This is simple. This is zero sum. This is what we need to develop, and you've got to charge the developers to develop. And there's no rabbit out of a hat on this one. So, I wait 60, 90 days, I'll wait, but I don't know that it changes anything. And, good luck with it. Thank you.
Well, Councillor Yanick, you've heard me say before, I describe development charges, like I compare it to a private membership at a golf course, where the development charges are your initiation fee and the taxes are your membership.
Yeah, well said.
Dues. Councillor Groves.
I'm not quite sure what to say after Councillor Yanick, because he said it very, very well. I wasn't prepared to support the motion. I mean, the timelines have moved up, and the concern that I had is the delays and what the cost would be to our communities with the delays. It's revenues that we would be losing in our municipalities as well. But if we're coming back with a September timeline, I think that I can support the motion with a September timeline, because as I said before, you've had a lot of consultation with the industry. So as Councillor Yanick said, I'm not sure what we're going to change. And we have one of our councillors in Caledon eloquently has a great analogy. It's like going into a nightclub. No matter which way you move, you're going to rub someone the wrong way. So really, I'm not quite sure.
For the record, some of us haven't been in nightclubs in 30 years, just for the record.
Maybe we'll just strike that one. in any case, in any case, with the new timeline, and I hope that we're going to stick to that new timeline, I'm fine with supporting the resolution. Thank you.
Okay, well said.
Councillor Parrish.
I got a tag.
Well, I'm a former high school teacher, and one of the truisms, first of all, as Nando said, is we always delay this. I watched you on TV when I was gone last time, and you delayed it again. So I think it's almost built in that we'll give you a 2-month delay, and everybody will go, good, build one, that one. Also, it's a persistent theme in that they always come back and ask for just 2 more months, just 2 more months. It's like cramming for exams, by the way, though. If you put this group together and they've got one meeting and they've got an opportunity to do something, it's like cramming for an exam. I think it forces you to focus. And I don't want to steal George's thunder because I'm sure he's going to say this, but I used to give essay extensions. Kids would come in begging, could I have 3 more days? And they still do it the night of the 3rd day. So I don't think you're going to get a lot of guys putting their applications in floods over the summer. And I don't think we're going to lose as much money as we always say we're going to lose. So I'll support it. And I think it's a pattern. So why don't we build that 2 months in, fake the date you want to do it, build in the 2 months, and we're all happy all the time. Have you guys not learned this?
If I may, through you, Mr. Chair, the reason this is July the 9th is because when we went through this in 2012, we had a request from a member of council, and it was part of the resolution that we could build a 1 month notice, or sorry, 1 month, a 1 year notice that we're coming back with an increase, and that is your transition period.
So then give them 14 months.
Bill put it out in their newsletters to their members that
Give them 14 months, fake the date. We'll do this every time, and it will be less fussing. Yeah. Anyway, thank you.
Councillor Carlson.
Well, Mr. Chair, I resent the implication that I'm cynical.
Oh no, we're looking for the final words of wisdom.
I wasn't gonna mention that. I was gonna use the fake wrestling analogy. You know, see you next week at Maple Leaf Gardens and all the fake blood running. Listen, if you really want to change the system, when we're not doing this piece of it, we should be meeting with the groups. If there is really some new master system that could be developed, which I don't really think there is, but if there is some new way of calculating by some geometry or other, we should be doing it when the pressure is not on, not now. This is, the cars come off the assembly line. It's too late to complain, I don't like the grill. You know, we've got to make sure that we have a system that's in place that's fair to everybody, and I think largely we do. But if you want to look at it, let's not do it with the end, the final moment coming so regularly as it does. So, you know, as Carol said, if we want to give the fake 2 month extension and complain and cry, let's go ahead and do it. And then, you know, then the guys still won't file their paperwork because I get the complaint that we taped it to the door to City Hall on the last day. We thought midnight was the last time. Like, there's no end to this. So believe me, and Nando's correct too, the next day when the new system's in, the applications come flying in just the same as ever. So it can't be all that bad of a system, Mr. Chair, but nevertheless, I'm willing to live in hope and that we can meet and maybe help a little bit with the pain. Thanks very much.
Okay. David, would you just comment on that?
Just to follow up on Councillor Carlson and Councillor Parrish's comments, the report you approved before this report, 10.6, actually does put in place, and it was recommended by the industry, a different process for 2017. So we've got almost 2 years to do this, to look at the whole system differently, to do it together, staff, council, the industry and the area municipalities, to look at the staging and phasing of development. And the proof will be in July 2017 to see if we're having the same discussion then.
Want to put money on it?
All right. Before we go to the vote, it was suggested that there be 9 members and 3 from each. It doesn't work quite. We got the 9, but there's 4 Mississauga, 2 Brampton, 3 Caledon, and I just want to be clear on that I don't have a problem with it, but it's, everybody okay with that? All right, just want to clarify that so I'm not criticized later. You have the motion before us. I have no more speakers. It's been moved by Councillor Sato, seconded by Councillor Raz. All in favor of the motion as presented? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. we'll do that. This brings us to Public Works. So, Councillor Starr, if you'd kindly chair this section of the meeting.
The first item on the agenda is frozen water pipes. Any questions, comments? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Commissioner LeBrecq. I just wanted to thank you very much for the report. I know that Ward 2 in Mississauga is probably one of the largest areas affected by frozen water services, and I think this is a really thorough report, and it was worth the wait, which you probably won't hear me say very often. I just want to keep in mind that that councillors have a huge role to play in the communications with the residents when it comes to frozen water services, and any preconditioning we can do with residents in advance. You know, we're going to be on the front lines of that, so please include us in any and all communications to residents, and maybe provide a councillor's package of which we can post up on the website and get out, even do, you know, hand delivering notices to those areas affected. I'm happy to do that. So with that, I just wanted to congratulate you on a good report, and please let me know how we can work together in the next couple of months to get the message out, and hopefully we won't have as cold a winter. Thank you.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Ross, seconded by Councillor Sato. All in favor? Carried. The second item that we have is residential water sewer warranty protection plans, and that's also related to the previous. Any questions, comments? Moved by Councillor Jeffrey, seconded by Councillor Parrish. All in favor? Third item is the arterial road rationalization, the update. Councillor Sato.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move that we defer the recommendation in the report, and that basically would leave things as status quo for now. I think we need more discussion. I have, when I was chairing the RAS committee, we had left this section for staff to continue on, as when we came into the new term, the committee was discontinued. So that was left for staff. But there are still some concerns that I have, and that our staff in Mississauga have, with regard to the using option 3 with the maintenance of the roadways. And it mainly still stems from the consistency and the fact that as members of council, we still end up dealing with two different departments, that was the whole idea of the committee, was to try and get rid of that overlap between the city and the region, to simplify it, mainly for the residents, because they don't care what road it is. But having to deal with staff in both municipalities is more time-consuming, delays the results for the resident, and delays the outcome. So I would suggest, I think it does need more discussion. I know, Dan, everybody on staff wants to get this over and done with and have the decision made, but there is not agreement from, I understand Brampton isn't in agreement either with this. And I think if we defer it to allow more discussion, whether it involves members of council again or not, I'm not suggesting that, but I just think right now, after the discussion I had with our commissioner, I just can't support going with option 3, because if a year from now or 6 months from now we want to change it, we have to reopen the question, and we get into a lot of legislative procedural issues in doing so. So I think if we could maybe defer it until the fall at least. I don't have a council date, but to allow for further discussion.
Mayor Crombie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I would agree with Councillor Sato. In fact, I thought that the fact that we dissolved that committee wasn't the right move, and that maybe we vet this through that committee. We strike that committee once again. Councillor Sato used to chair that committee, I believe, and since she has concerns, maybe she would be interested in sitting on that again or chairing it again. I'm happy to sit on it. Yeah. No, I mean, I think it performed a role. I mean, I don't see how else we can have that discussion, what forum there would be to have that discussion. So perhaps we reconstitute that committee and one or two from each municipality sit on it. I'm happy to do so too. There's a lot of money at stake here, and I have a lot of questions as well. And it's the dead of summer, and I want a bit more time to kind of process this $21 million a year that this involves. So if we could, maybe I'll move a motion that we reconstitute the Arterial Road Committee. And anyone interested in seconding? Councillor, okay, got Councillor Fonseca or Councillor Parrish.
Okay.
And maybe we could just have a small mini subcommittee to meet with the commissioner and the staff to vet this.
Okay, we have that motion. I'm sorry? Oh, I didn't see him on the list. I'm only kidding. Go ahead, David.
Goes with the job. I was just wondering, as an alternative to forming the committee again and getting the committee going, the committee did work for 8 years to get us to the point where we were basically have one issue left to resolve. Perhaps we could take a page from Councillor Sato's book from the last issue and form a task force to deal specifically with the one issue and resolve it perhaps over the next few months with, again, staff and councillor members working together to get to the bottom of this and resolve it.
All right, I see that as a friendly amendment. I'm happy to sit on the task force. Can we take some names, or Mr. Chair?
Okay. Take it all as an amendment.
We'll probably need a Brampton individual, or Brampton Roads at stake as well. That issue. Mayor's volunteering. Voluntold.
You can sit on it.
Okay.
Looks like the mayor's.
Madam Clerk, have you caught those folks?
I have Mayor Crombie, Mayor Jeffrey, Councillor Sato,
I'll sit on it along with
Mayor Thompson,
Shaughnessy.
Councillor Shaughnessy.
Chris, do you want to do it? Did you want to?
Councillor Pleshy?
No, okay. We're okay. Councillor
just
Sato's
for-
got your road on it, though.
For clarity, if I can, so we will schedule a meeting with these councillors and staff and defer the report until October?
It's fine.
Until October?
I think it gives us a little more time. We're going to be busy over the summer, sounds like.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll take it that Councillor Sato, you move this? Or the deferral?
If you want to add in.
Seconded by Councillor, or Mayor Crombie. All in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Okay, we have the Professional Engineering Services, City of Brampton. Any questions, comments? Ward 6 is Councillor Pleshy, seconded by Councillor Miles. All in favor? Mayor Crombie.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I did have my name up. So, in the allocation of the bid, I noticed that I thought typically we take lowest bid, and we have taken the highest bid here. I know that the financials only account for 20%, 80% technical. I'm just wondering if the commissioner could explain why we took the highest bid when the second highest, which the second technical ranking would have perhaps been more suitable and a greater savings.
Yep, if I could, through you, Mr. Chairman. Just to be clear, in the procurement process, the low bid carries the day in a request for tender process where the specification is very detailed and specific. This is the work you're going to do. Under a request for proposal, we have to look at two elements, the cost of the bid, as well as the technical representation that the proponent is bringing forward. While the scores are in the technical are shown in ranking, there's a significant difference between the first and the second and the third and the fourth. The first technical piece was actually presented a lot more as what we thought were value-add pieces that would actually reduce the cost of the bigger construction project, which is in the range of, probably in the range of $30 or $40 million. It includes a complex grade separation north of Beauvert over the Kitchener line. So that's why we implemented are recommending the highest technical score, which just happens to be, in this case, the highest financial, but the increased cost is well covered by the gains we're going to get on, in effect, their design proposals that they're recommending that we put in place when we go to the actual request for tender for the construction.
And none of those other companies would provide those as well?
None of those presented that in their
It was
proposals.
$500,000.
Yep, it's actually more.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Well,
it's
averaging,
almost,
depending.
600,000. Yeah, and
Well,
we did actually
from
spend time
Hirschfeld.
with the chairman going over more details of that. We knew that would come an issue.
Mhm.
It's around the environmental elements that they brought forward. They've got some creative ways of dealing with traffic management, which will reduce both cost and impact to the community. And actually, the way that they propose that we deal with the actual overpass over the CNR line actually save us at least $1.5 million in the construction process by making the construction process more simple.
I would think with Hanlon, we'd be pros at traffic management by now. Chairman,
They
satisfied?
proposed a different level of traffic management that would save money and improve actually the construction process.
Okay. Well, I saw this as a bit unorthodox, but okay, the chairman is satisfied?
As a matter of fact, I spent probably at least 2.5 hours with staff and went through the details, suggested some alternates, and an arm wrestling contest with the proponents, and that didn't work. But I was fully satisfied that after meeting and going through the details that this was the right choice.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I think it was moved by Councillor Pelletier, seconded by Councillor Miles. All in favor? The next item is 6.5 in Caledon. Any questions, comments? Councillor Groves, Councillor Downey, move it and second it. All in favor? Carried. In 6.6, questions, comments? Councillor Maderos, Councillor Pelletier, all in favor? Carried. 6.7. Questions, comments? Mayor Jeffrey, Councillor Sproveri, all in favor? And 6.8, I would think that would have been Councillor Tovey, but Councillor Ross, Councillor Sato, all in favor? Carried. We have included on your additional agendas, whatever, 5 pieces of correspondence.
I'll move them all.
And Councillor moved all of them. Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Mahoney. Okay, all in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Pelletier.
All the correspondence, you mean, like the communication that's come in from everything from 7...
1 to 7.5.
7.1 to 7.5, okay. I do have a question on one of those items. 7.11 is a letter from, I don't know, Matza something. It's dated June 10th. And the one that we just received today, dated July 9th, I understand that this letter dated June 10th. Why wasn't this brought to Regional Council? I believe we had a meeting on the 11th and or the 25th. And then why the one that was sent, today's the 9th, gets on today?
The June 10th letter was sent that date but not received that date. So we didn't include it on the agenda because we didn't actually have it. And I included the letter that we received.
It was sent on the 10th, but you
I
didn't
didn't receive it
have
on the 10th. I didn't receive it on the 10th. It was written on the 10th.
Okay.
But it wasn't received on the 10th.
Okay.
And the letter this morning, I did put it on this morning because this is the last council meeting before September, so we added it on
Okay,
this
so
morning.
we had a meeting in between the 11th and now.
Yes.
Why didn't you make it then? When did you actually receive the letter?
I have to go back and check, but.
Because they sent it on the 10th.
I didn't receive it on the 10th, though, that it was
So
dated the 10th.
maybe you got it on the 11th?
Probably the 11th.
And then, so why didn't it hit the 25th?
I don't
Okay.
have a, we typically try to put things together. It was from Brampton. I don't know why we didn't get it on the 25th, to be honest. I don't know why.
Okay. I
apologize.
I just want to make sure that there's no favoritism going on
No,
with anything.
no,
Okay.
no, absolutely not. It was oversight, if anything.
Okay.
And I
Thanks
apologize
so
for
much.
that.
No
but-
worries. No need for
And we got it
apologies.
on this morning just to have it dealt with together.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Okay, just to be clear, we're moving all 5 pieces of correspondence, moved by Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Mahoney. All in favor? Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Items related to health, Councillor Moore, if you kindly chair this section.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The first item is 8.1, a paramedic make-ready model evaluation. It is a recommendation report. Councillor Sato.
Thank you. Just a very quick question, I guess, to Jeanette. You said that there was funding for the make-ready model to go out to an external vendor, and that there is money available in the 2015 budget. Is the amount that we're going to spend for hiring the staff the same as what was budgeted for the external vendor?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, give or take a few
Right.
thousand, it's sufficient to do that, yes.
So it's pretty close then to
Yeah.
what we expected to spend?
That's right. There won't be any impact on next year's budget at
Okay.
all.
Thank you. I'll move the recommendation.
Great, thank you. Councillor Raz.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and also Councillor Sato took my first question, and I'm just, I guess, a little, I'm wondering if you can help me understand how there could be no one available for cleaning services. I mean, was our procurement process too strict, too tight? I'm just wondering to get some background on why we would have to take on 10 additional staff people for cleaning services versus outsourcing that.
Right.
Through you, Madam Chair, it's more substantial than just cleaning, certainly decontaminating the ambulance and cleaning. It's the whole inventory controls and stocking the ambulance with things like oxygen and different supplies. So it was the whole make-ready process, and they weren't able to do the whole scope of it. We looked at whether there were some options. We could carve some of it off and us do pieces and outsource the other pieces, but we just couldn't find the efficiencies by starting to take all the separate pieces apart. This certainly doesn't negate us trying again in the future. I think in this industry, it's just very unusual to outsource, and there isn't a vendor right now, but doesn't mean in the future. But for now, the station will be opening up later this year, so we do need to have the make-ready process in place. But
Okay, thank you. Would you like to second it, Councillor Raz? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the Paramedic Service 2014 Annual Performance Report. It's an information report. Councillor McFadden, you'd like to move that, seconded by Mayor Crombie. Councillor Raz?
It's somewhat related to annual performance report. There was an article in, I think, the Toronto Star yesterday, the day before, about fire medics. And I'm just wondering if perhaps staff can comment on that. I know it's a bit of a... Don't even go there. Don't even go there? Ask her. Okay. Strike that from the record then. I'll take it offline.
We'll
Okay.
talk to you.
I am curious.
I have a mover and a seconder. Thank you. All those in favor? Sorry, all those in favor? It's carried. The third item is 8.3. It's the discontinuation of temporary provincial funding for community support services. Moved by Councillor Groves. And you're on the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question, Jeanette. I know that staff will be having discussion with the LINs. Do you need support from council? Do you need anything from us to highlight the importance of this program? Because I know that we've got the day program at the Davis Center in Bolton, and I will tell you the residents there really look forward to going to that program. Not only does it keep them healthy socially, it keeps them healthy physically and mentally. So it's really unfortunate reading this report that funding is going to be taken away from one of the homes. So do you need anything from us?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm always hesitant to say no to any extra support, but I do know the Lynn staff tabled a report, the Central West Lynn staff tabled a report to their board of directors, which is a public report, identifying what their priorities would be once they get their allocation from the province for their community support service envelope. And this is the one envelope that the province is continuing to invest in. I think the budget announced either a 4 or 5% increase, whereas other areas in the health sector, they're holding at 0. And they have identified in the top 3 priorities continuing this money for both the adult day at Tall Pines and the enhancement at the other 3. It's right in the top 3. So it really is about waiting to hear from the province on what their allocation is. And if they don't get enough money, then the advocacy would be to the province. But I'm fully confident the LIN knows the importance, and they just have to wait.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Thank you.
But what I could do is if we get this information between now and September, I can certainly, we could bring a report in the fall, but if we get news in between, I can send out a note to all of council so they're aware.
Right, that would be great. Thanks very much.
I'm looking for a seconder for that. Councillor Gibson, all those in favor? That's carried. Last item is an update on the air quality health index in Ontario. It's just an update report. Would someone like to move receipt? Councillor Fonseca, seconded by Councillor Mahoney. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. Moves us to items related to human services. Councillor Miles.
Of Council, you have a report in front of you in regards to creating affordable rental housing through residential condominium unit acquisitions, which is something new to the region of Peel. There is a recommendation here on this report. Are there any questions? Seeing no questions, moved by Mayor Jeffrey, seconded by Councillor Fonseca. All in favor? That's carried. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Items related to enterprise programs and services. Councillor Fonseca, if you'd chair this section, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 10.1, the encroachment agreement, Regional Road 7, Caledon Ward 3. This is in the new agenda. Moved by Councillor Innes, seconded by Councillor Groves. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Item 10.2 is the Regional Peel Strategic Update. This is for information. Seeing no questions. I did have one question to staff, I guess. Just how are the community engagement meetings going?
They're going quite well, actually. There's 42 events scheduled. We've done 35, and they're quite successful, actually. We're getting a lot of input from the community.
And can councillors continue if there is some sort of an event or an opportunity to have a further meeting, continue to make the request to have a meeting? Okay. Okay, thank you. Moved by Councillor McFadden. Oh, Councillor McFadden, you had a question?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, is there a way that we can find out what the attendance was at each of the wards? Because I know mine was this week, and I'd just like to know how many actual participants were there throughout the day, because I did pop in, but I'd like to know for my own records.
Certainly. Through you, Madam Chair, we'll provide you with that
Okay, thank
information
you.
to all of Council.
Councillor McFadden, would you like to move the report? Okay. Moved by Councillor McFadden, seconded by Councillor Sato. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Item 10.3 is the strategic direction. This is for an office master plan. This is for information. I understand that plan will be brought back in the fall. Seeing no questions, moved by Councillor Parrish, seconded by Councillor Downey. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Item 10.4 is update on growth management, and this is for information. It's tied into the next, well, 10.6, but the next three items. We'll move by Councillor Ross, seconded by Councillor Mahoney. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Items 10.5, 10.6, and 10.7 were dealt with. All of them were moved. So we'll move on to 10.8. It's the 2015 Triannual Financial Performance Report. Seeing no questions, moved by Councillor Kovacs, seconded by Councillor Gibson. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Items 10.9 is the Canada 150 Community Infrastructure Program. Question. Yes, Mayor Crombie. Question.
I just had a question. It seemed that we only went with one selection for the Canada 150 program to be funded. The City of Mississauga, we outlined one per ward and a couple of others, so I'm just wondering, was there not a more extensive list that we could submit so they had some options should they choose that and didn't like that when they had another one to choose from? The elevator at Hama?
Certainly through you, Madam Chair. Staff did go through a consultation process with each of the departments to see what projects that we have that adequately meet the criteria that were established for the program. This is the one that stepped out as being the most suitable. There were some projects that are being actually led by the conservation authorities that are also being put forward through the conservation authorities that were also meeting the criteria well. So this was the one that was ready and meeting the criteria the best.
Okay, just wanted to be sure that the due diligence was done. We submitted quite a number in the City of Mississauga, so I was surprised to see only the one. Thank you.
Okay, moved by Councillor McFadden, seconded by Mayor Crombie. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. 10.10 is in the new agenda items, a complaint pursuant to Section 20 of the Development Charges Act. This is Chateau of Caledon. Moved by Councillor Groves, seconded by Mayor Thompson. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Item 10.11 is the Peel Council Code of Conduct. This is also on the new agenda item. This is from the Integrity Commissioner. Moved by, yes, Mayor Crombie.
Yeah, so this is a late item that I'd like some more time to digest. I certainly would like to know what the costs involved would be. I think each of the municipalities already have an integrity commissioner, so I'm wondering if we're not duplicating here. And I don't know which issues the integrity commissioner at the region would hear and how that would differ from what the our own integrity commissioners now hear. Certainly, I feel like there's some duplication and I would have to report in twice. So I'm not supportive, but I can be convinced. So I'm just going to suggest that maybe we could have more information and bring this back, maybe in September or October. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Unica.
Thank you, and I share the same sentiment, but even more so, I certainly want to look at it, I think it might have, but I'd like to take it back to our integrity commissioner and say, this is what we're being asked to do here. What are we doing here that's not the same? Is it identical? Is it something worth doing? Because otherwise, it really looks like duplication on its face. So I would like to have another look at it and determine what model is the best model for the transparency that we should have. And is it a replica of what we're doing? Does it enhance it? Should it be done at one tier only? All of the above. I think we should have a look at it. So I would welcome it coming in back and to have those discussions with our integrity commissioner and our governance committee as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Unica. Mayor Jeffrey.
It doesn't speak to it in this report, but I believe our integrity commissioner at Brampton is the same as Mississauga's, but ours is part-time. And this report doesn't speak to whether this is going to be a full-time position or a part-time. So I think we need some more clarity, and I think the City of Brampton certainly has been considering a full-time integrity commissioner. So I think we need some clarity before we can judge this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sato.
Thank you. Well, I have no problem with staff moving ahead to develop a process and bring something back to council with a potential budget. But when Councillor Miles and I'm trying to think who else was on our committee, Gail, and myself, who was it? Councillor Paderak, thank you. How quickly we forget, right? We served on the committee at the region to bring forward the code of conduct for the region of Peel. And that involved reading and in depth the 3 codes of conduct of the municipalities. And ultimately what we passed at the region of Peel was ensuring that the region's code of conduct does not overlap and does not conflict and does not duplicate what is in the municipal codes of conduct. And that was very specifically done so that we didn't have that duplication or confusion. We left the issue of the integrity commissioner, and it was part of the recommendation that we look at it with the new term of office, but we left the issue of the integrity commissioner to a later date because we weren't quite sure that we needed one, because most of the areas that are in the regional code of conduct, the integrity commissioners in the municipalities deal with municipally. So we didn't feel that there was that much in the regional code of conduct that would require, it definitely would not require a full-time integrity commissioner. So, you know, I have no problem with staff perhaps bringing a report back in the fall to review the pros and cons and see what's out there for part-time, given the wording that's in our code of conduct, and ensuring that, you know, we don't need to hire another integrity commissioner that's going to duplicate what is being done at the municipalities. And at one point we did look at the option, which is included in this report, of having the local integrity commissioners deal with regional issues, and as staff have reported, that's not workable. So we are looking at, you know, they are looking at a separate person. I don't think we need full-time, not given the code that we have. So maybe we can, if the request for proposal, that means that staff would then go out and get proposals, but that doesn't bind us to hiring anyone. So, you know, I don't see any problem with staff going out, doing the request for proposal, bring back all of the options to council, and then we can review it and decide whether we want to proceed and whether we want to select one of the proponents or not. Is that, maybe staff could respond if that would be workable.
We could certainly provide more information for council either in advance of the RFP or after. Either way, it's at the preference of council, but we'd be quite willing to bring forward options for you and more analysis.
I think we need options to be brought forward.
So, Councillor Sato, just for clarification, are you saying you'd be, as far as commenting, being on the committee last term, to bring forward further clarification and options in the fall and then go out for the request, or?
Yeah, I think that might work. I think staff would be comfortable with that as well, and that would address the concern that Councillor
Okay.
Crombie raised.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Miles.
Chairman, I'd like to ask that we refer this to the next council meeting. Most of us on this side of the room don't have a copy of the report, and quite a few of us have given up trying to use electronic agendas as well.
It is in the new agenda items.
It wasn't, sorry, but none of us have it over here.
Okay, no problem.
So we really don't know what you're talking about. So if I could move a referral to the next meeting and hopefully... Pardon?
Refer to staff to answer the questions.
Yes, so we will refer it to the next meeting, including options and looking at part-time clarity around the position as to the questions that were asked by other councillors. Okay, so Councillor Miles, would you like to move that?
Yes, I'll move referral. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Miles, seconded by Councillor Say. Oh, another question. Yes, Councillor Ross.
When the report gets circulated, was there a previous report that was done under the last council? Yes. I'm wondering if that could be circulated as well, if available. Thank
Okay,
you.
include direction to circulate that report. Could that be circulated now, as soon as possible, or come with the report? But I think it would be good to have that in advance. Okay, moved by Councillor Miles, seconded by Councillor Sato. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Okay, thank you. And 10.12 is a report of Government Relations Committee, June 11th, 2015. Moved by Councillor Badero, seconded by Councillor Sparbieri. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. There's 2 items of communication. They're both for receipt. We'll move those together. Moved by Councillor Innes, seconded by Councillor Carlson. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. And I believe that is it. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Moves us to other business, and there's 2 resolutions that came out of the FCM conference with respect to federal funding for housing and federal election debates. And if staff would be kind enough to put them up on the screen for members, because I believe they're fairly lengthy. And Mayor Crombie? Oh, okay, we'll do these first. Sure. So we need a seconder for these. Councillor Downey? These were circulated in the agenda. Everybody okay with this? We'll take this one first, then moved by Councillor Fonseca, seconded by Councillor Downey. All those in favor as presented? Carried. And then the second motion. Again, it's moved by Councillor Fonseca, seconded by Mayor Thompson. All in favor of this resolution? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Mayor Crombie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to a new issue, and I wanted to refer it back to staff, to our acting medical officer of health for some input. And this is about the whole issue of the water pipes, and we talked about hookahs, not hookers, and shisha. So I heard that come up earlier. So a report from the Toronto's medical officer of health says that the city needs to consider a ban on hookah smoking in bars and in cafes because of public health concerns. The report notes that while tobacco use in cafes is banned under the province's Smoke-Free Ontario Act, an air quality study of 12 hookah lounges in Toronto found that some of the nicotine levels rivaled those in European bars and restaurants that allow smoking. So 4 municipalities have banned this practice and that of water pipe smoking, including Peterborough, Orillia, Bradford, West Gwillimbury, and Barrie, and of course City of Vancouver banned it back in 2007. University of Alberta found that like cigarettes, tobacco, shisha emits similar levels of cancer-causing chemicals such as benzopyrene, a marker for a common carcinogen in air pollution emissions of toxins such as carbon monoxide. Carcinogens, and including tar, were very high. So we're starting to see this proliferation of this practice in Middle Eastern restaurants, and they're catering to young people. I know they're very popular with young people. I have 3 of them at home myself. And I think there's a belief that this is safe, and it is not safe. So I'm wondering if maybe we could take a look at it and you could make some recommendations back to council in the fall.
I think staff will take that as direction to come back with a
Absolutely.
report. Okay.
On hookahs.
All right.
3 hookahs. Thank you.
Notice of motion from Councillor Ennis regarding the appointment of a lobbyist and gift registrar. And it was seconded by Councillor Moore. Any discussion on this or comments? Councillor Sato.
Yeah, I guess I would like more information as to what this would involve. We specifically, when we passed the Code of Conduct in the last term, and it was just last year that we passed it, we specifically removed the, what I'm assuming is being referred to here as a gift registry from the Code of Conduct. and Councillor Miles, as I said, was on the committee. She'll recall the reason why, is that each of the municipal codes of conduct have a requirement for recording and reporting gifts that are received by members of council. And particularly for those of us that sit as both a regional and a city councillor, it made no sense whatsoever to have a duplication, again, of a gift registry at the region when we already have one at the municipality. So I can't support that part of the motion, as to start with, it doesn't even refer to the fact that the code of conduct be amended. It doesn't refer to it at all in the motion, and that is part of the code of conduct. And it is, as I said, it was something we discussed in depth, and we really wanted to try and not have that duplication. And to be recording both the city and the region is absolutely
Councillor
ridiculous.
Sato, if I may, this motion does ask staff to report back.
Okay, where's include recommendation staff?
This isn't further that
Well,
staff.
it does, yeah, but it says include recommendations on staffing oversight, appointment of a registrar. Okay, so I guess we'll have a further opportunity for discussion. Okay. Yeah, I'm not interested even in staff reporting back, because we've already been there, we've done that, we've had staff discussion, we've had reports to council, and the decision was made, albeit it was the last term of council, but it is a new code of conduct. It was just put in place towards the end of 2014, and I think it's still relevant today, so I'm personally not interested in reviewing that. The issue of a lobbyist, I don't think it's something we've really discussed around here, and I don't get lobbied all that often, so, it's not a concern, but I guess through the discussion, recording conversations, communications, tracking communications. I guess I'm just, I don't want staff wasting a lot of time. The recommendation is to develop a framework, which is basically telling staff to go ahead and establish an entire framework for both a lobbyist registry and a gift registry. I don't mind staff reporting back on general information on how each would work, but I certainly don't want them spending a great amount of time until we've decided whether we want to move ahead with it or not.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no problem with supporting this. I know we're doing in City of Brampton doing some work on both these issues, and I think that we need to direct staff to look at what the other municipalities are doing. Mississauga is a little bit different than what we are, because Mississauga has all regional councillors sitting on city and region. In Brampton, we don't, and Caledon doesn't either. So when we talked about this, and I'm the chair of the committee in Brampton, we decided we couldn't behold our regional councillors to something that we were doing in Brampton. So although I wouldn't want to see us, do different things here than what we're doing in each municipality, I think it'd be worth having staff report back, look at what the other municipalities are doing, and let us know. And there may be some synergies there that we can work on for all of it. So I'd be happy to support this, or second it if you need a seconder.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Well, thank you, and I believe I seconded the motion for today. I do think that there's a perception that there's a gap between our area municipality and those, it's different for Mississauga, you sit at both, but for Brampton and Caledon, we have some folks back home, and there could very well be a perception, in fact, I think there is, that somehow we might be able to get away with something at the region that we can't at the area municipality. I do want to say, if we're referring back the RFP for the Integrity Commissioner, since our process at the city is that our Integrity Commissioner plays the role of, adjudicating over these two, that if you're going to put out an RFP, the scope of what we might be expecting from them would need to be incorporated into that, so that you're not bringing them in with, one expectation and changing it in the event that we move in this direction. I don't think this needs to be onerous. Certainly our area municipalities and other municipalities have done a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of some of the guidelines around the lobbyist registrar and the gift registry. And maybe the recommendation is that if there's a gift registry back at home, the expectation here, back at home being our area municipality, that there's an expectation that we would register anything that would be seen as a regional potential gift is registered back at home. But I think this is really just making it consistent among the 3 area municipalities in the region so that there's no perception or potential optic that somehow we're operating by different rules and have a greater degree of latitude here. So I'm happy to second it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Crombie.
I don't know. In my mind, a gift is a gift is a gift. It's a gift. There's not a regional gift and a city gift. A gift is a gift. If you're going to declare a gift, your integrity commissioner, you're going to declare a gift. Do you distinguish it? I wouldn't distinguish it. I would report it. There's not another need for another level of reporting. I think I agree completely with Councillor Sato that this is a waste of staff's time. We already have this in place. We already, all of us, declare our gifts. We have to. And I don't not declare it because it's a regional gift. I don't even know what that would be. I don't know what that would look like. A gift is a gift. So it would be declared. It would be what?
A map of Caledon.
Stop. So I don't see how we distinguish from a regional. There's conversation going on both sides of me, so I'm having trouble. But I don't see this as necessary. I don't distinguish from being a regional councillor and a city councillor or the mayor. If I were to receive a gift, I would declare it to my integrity commissioner. I don't want another level. I don't think it's necessary. And with respect to the lobbyist registry, that is very cumbersome. We did look at this, Councillor Sato. You'll think back, and we did have this discussion when we created our code of conduct, and we attempted to find who a lobbyist was, and we agreed that any citizen who came to you more than 2 or 3 times on one issue became a lobbyist, and you were calling your residents lobbyists, and it was becoming very cumbersome to people come and see you. So that's the reason we didn't include a lobbyist registry when we created our code of conduct, and because we already have it. I know each of us do have a gift registry at each of our cities. I think this is an unnecessary layer that is cumbersome and complicated. It doesn't simplify anything. It requires me to report twice to 2 levels of government. So no, I'm not in favor of this at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ennis.
Thank you, Chair. I originally brought this motion forward because, and Councillor Gibson said it best, Caledon and Brampton are a little bit different than Mississauga in the sense that we're dealing with 2 different levels of government. On one hand, I'm dealing with area municipal issues, and on another hand, I'm dealing with regional issues, which are very separate and very different from what I'm dealing with at the local level. So bringing this forward, it was my hope that it would create further transparency, not only for us, but also for our senior level of staff here at the region. Because the reality is, lobbying does occur. And it's not just for these people sitting around this table, but also for our senior staff. And this is an opportunity to protect them and their best interests as well. And my request for staff to review it and come back, I think is harmless. I think it's a way for us to ensure that we are being transparent and being open and public with our taxpayers and their money. And that's why I've requested for this to come forward.
Councillor Medeiros.
Through you, Mr. Chair. As I do agree that the gift is a gift is a gift, where I differ is that the issues are very completely different. So my experience as being the new councillor, the issues I deal with the municipality very distinct to my municipal business, and when I come to the region, they're really regional issues. And I think from a level of transparency, the people I represent, the residents should know what am I being lobbied on and what are the topics and issues. So I do think there's merit that staff go away with that perception of looking at the alignment currently with the municipalities, such as Councillor Gibson mentioned, and Brampton, we're developing our own. And sure, there's some consistency, but I do not see an issue where, at least for residents, that we do communicate what are the issues of the day. I do also agree the fact it is a form of protection for senior staff. I think it's always important that we do develop this framework where not only for staff, but also for the lobbyists, that they understand this is the rules of engagement. So I will be supporting this motion.
Thank you. Mayor Thompson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, maybe what we could do is do it in two parts when we vote on it. And that way, I think.
No, we don't.
No? All right. I was just putting that out there because I do know that some of them have an opposition to it.
It's coming back.
All right.
Okay, thanks.
Just trying to speed it up.
All right, appreciate the help. Councillor Parrish.
Well, we were just handed the code of conduct, and on the last page it says review process. To ensure the code remains relevant and current, regional staff will review any significant legislative or internal policy changes for possible impact on the code of conduct and report to regional council where necessary. So it's covered in here. Let's just get on with it, and if we don't like the recommendations, we vote them down. But it says right in the code of conduct that it should be reviewed at the beginning of each term, so let's just get on with it. How's that?
Thank you. Well, seeing no other speakers, the motion has been moved and seconded. Take it as read. All those in favor? A recorded vote? Okay, Madam Clerk.
All those in favor, please rise. Councillor. Oh. In favor? Councillor Carlson, Mayor Crombie, Councillor Downey, Councillor Fonseca, Councillor Gibson, Councillor Groves, Councillor Unica, Councillor Innes, Mayor Jeffrey, Councillor Kovac, Councillor Mahoney, Councillor McFadden, Councillor Medeiros, Councillor Miles, Councillor Moore, Councillor Paleshi, Councillor Parrish, Councillor Raz, Councillor Sato, Councillor Shaughnessy, Councillor Sprovieri, Councillor Starr, Mayor Thompson. It's unanimous.
Thank you. Bylaws. Or bylaw.
Just bylaw.
Moved by Councillor Shaughnessy, seconded by Councillor Groves, that the bylaw listed on Regional Council agenda being bylaw 47-2015 be given the required number of readings, taken as read, signed by the regional chair and the regional clerk, and the corporate seal be affixed thereto. All in favor? Show of hands. Opposed, if any? Carried. And we're in camera. Do we?
We need to move in camera.
I need to get direction, remember, on that.
Oh, yes, okay. Okay, so I need a motion to move into camera. Moved by Councillor Starr, seconded by Mayor Thompson. We could clear the council chambers except for those that are here for the in-camera report. Thank you.